All right, so this is chapter 11. So once again, I'm using this book, so pages are going to be a little bit different. But we're going to start at the end of chapter 11. You needed to read all of chapter 11. I want you to kind of see the interaction between Mrs. DuBose and Jem and Scout and all of that, because it's going to help you answer the question that I'm going to have at the end of this. We are going to start... On mine, it's 147, so if you happen to have, like, a different version. 147, but we are about this far from the end, okay? And we're going to start at, he answered it, then went to the hat rack in the hall. He answered it, then went to the hat rack in the hall. So if you need a minute, pause, but I'm going to read. I'm going down to Mrs. DuBose's for a while, he said. It won't be long. But Atticus stayed away until long past my bedtime. When he returned, he was carrying a candy box. Atticus sat down in the living room and put the box on the floor beside his chair. What'd you want? Asked Jem. What'd she want? Asked Jem. We had not seen Mrs. DuBose for over a month. She was never on the porch anymore when we passed. She's dead, son, said Atticus. She died a few minutes ago. Oh, said Jem. Well is right, said Atticus. She's not suffering anymore. She was sick for a long time. Son, didn't you know what her fits were? Jem shook his head. Mrs. DuBose was a morphine addict, said Atticus. She took it as a painkiller for years. The doctor put her on it. She'd have spent the rest of her life on it and died without so much agony, but she was too contrary. Sir, said Jem, Atticus said. Just before your escapade, she called me to make her will. Dr. Reynolds told her she only had a few months left. Her business affairs were in perfect order. But she said, there's still one thing out of order. What was that? Jem was perplexed. She said she was going to leave this world beholden to nothing and nobody. Jem, when you're sick as she was, it's all right to take anything to make it easier. But it wasn't all right for her. She said she meant to break herself of it before she died, and that's what she did. Jem said, you mean that's what her fits were? Yes, that's what they were. Most of the time you were reading to her, I doubt it if she heard a word you were said. Her whole body and mind were concentrated on that alarm clock. If you hadn't fallen into her hands, I'd have made you go to read her anyway. It may have been some distraction. There was another reason. Did she die free? Asked Jem. As the mountain air, said Atticus. She was conscious in the last, almost conscious, he smiled, and cantankerous, like Henri. She still disapproved heartily of my doings and said I'd probably spend the rest of my life bailing you out of jail. She had Jessie fix you this box. Atticus reached down and picked up the candy box. He handed it to Jem. Jem opened the box. Inside, surrounded by wads of damp cloth, was a white, waxy, perfect camellia. It was a snow on the mountain. Jem's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Old hell devil, he screamed, flinging it down. Why can't she leave me alone? In a flash, Atticus was up and standing over him. Jem buried his face in Atticus's shirt. Shh, he said. I think this was her way of telling you. Everything's all right now, Jem. Everything's all right. You know she was a great lady. A lady? Jem raised his head. His face was scarlet. After all those things she said about you, a lady? She was. She had her own views about things, a lot different from mine, maybe, son. I told you that if you hadn't lost your head, I'd have made you go to read to her. I want you to see something about her. I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. You rarely win, but sometimes you do. Mrs. DuBose won, all 98 pounds of her. According to her views, she died beholden to nothing and nobody. She was the bravest person I ever knew. Jem picked up the candy box and threw it in the fire. He picked up the camellia and when I went off to bed, I saw him fingering the white petals. Atticus was reading the paper. So something I want you guys to notice is that now we start part 2. And so part 1 was very much an introduction. It's our characters, our setting, the time period, those sorts of things. And so, but a lot of this lays the stage for what's to come with the trial. And so that's why we read a good portion, but some of it we skipped because, you know, it wasn't necessary to understanding the complete story of what we're going to get into. But what I want you guys to respond to today is this idea of bravery and courage. So I want you to think about and respond to who is or what is a brave or courageous act. It can be somebody in your life who has displayed bravery or courage. It could be something you've read online. It could be just something that you've experienced in the last week. And it doesn't really have to be. If it's something from before the time of quarantine, that's not any less important than something that is now. It doesn't have to be something as courageous as what's currently going on in our communities today. So don't downplay that. Your experience is as important now as ever. And so what you're doing right now is courageous, yes. But it's up to you what you want to write about. If it's something that's brave and courageous from 2 months ago, and maybe that seems less to you right now, that's not less. It's still something that's brave and courageous. So I want your responses to be sent through Haiku, write, type it, and send it in that way. Probably the best thing to do is on 365. It's easy to attach, or something that's saved on your computer. And that is going to be your chapter 11 reflective assignment. So hope you all are doing well. I will probably send out a form later on this week, a little survey if you'd like to do that. But I'll most likely see you all on Monday again. But if you need me, I'll be checking emails and doing all that business. And I got to go get some produce today. So I got my mask and all the business. And so I'm going to go get some real life vegetables because we're out. All right. Take care, friends.